Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Three Geeks conversation. I am honored to be joined by a childhood hero of mine, Mr. Burt Ward. Burt, thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
Hello, citizens.
I want to start off with your gentle giants. How did you become so impassioned with animals?
Well, 27 years ago, my wife and I moved here. We were living at the beach or right near the beach and had a 4-story house overlooking the water. Is fantastic. And we have a daughter. And here you got a little 3-year-old running around on some of these decks that were 40 feet above the ground. And we're like, oh, no. I'm not going to worry like that. So we decided to move inland. We moved here to a city called Norco. It's like the last Western town in America where horses have the right of way over cars. You drive down the road and instead of the dotted white lines, you have the dotted red, white, and blue lines. I mean, this is like, all America type thing. And we decided that we'd get a pet for our daughter to grow up with a dog. And my wife had grown up with Irish Wolfhounds. I always wanted to have a Great Dane. And we started on a search. And we found out about rescuing. So we rescued a Great Dane. And then we heard of a couple of others that needed rescue, and we rescued one more. And then we figured the other ones that we heard about that needed rescue were still in people's homes. They weren't in a shelter where there was an immediate chance of death. So we figured, well, they'll rescue, so they'll find a home for those dogs. And it turns out, as we found out later, that all the dogs that just about every one of the beautiful Great Danes were put to death in shelters because they couldn't find somebody to take it. And I don't know if you guys know anything about rescue, but rescues are rescued by breed. So there's a Chihuahua rescue, there's a German Shepherd rescue. Just about every breed of dog has a rescue. But the lady in Southern California that had been rescuing Great Danes herself had died. And so now all the Great Danes in Southern California that had to be given up were going to shelters and being put to death. And these, I don't know if you've ever enjoyed the company of a Great Dane, but these are true gentle giants. I mean, that believe it or not, the bigger they are, the more gentle they are. So it was the first week in August of 1994. I said to my wife, Tracy, I said, we can't let these dogs die. I mean, they're just so wonderful. Why don't we just start taking them? Okay. And I'm sure within a couple of weeks, we'll find somebody else to take them over, but we do our good thing, our good deed. Well, we didn't find anybody. In fact, it's been 27 years and we're still looking for that people to take them over. But by the end of August of 1994, within 3 weeks of when we started, in our home, we had 102 Great Danes, full size, 102, plus 62 puppies under 7 weeks of age. We never bred a dog, but we rescued litters that shelters would call us up and say, hey, we just got this litter and it's, not safe in a shelter. There's potential for disease. Can you, get puppies out of shelters? So anyway, we had all these dogs and so we started caring for them and we really started to learn. I mean, think about it. If you have a minimum of 50 dogs in your home for 27 years, believe me, you learn how to care for dogs. Okay. And but one thing we found out was that the giant breeds tend to have shorter lifespans. Great Danes traditionally only live 7 to 9 years. Mastiffs and Irish Wolfhounds, 6 to 8 years. I mean, what an injustice to only be on this beautiful planet for such a short period of time. So the ones that we didn't adopt, and we adopted 15,500 as of about 3 years ago, we stopped counting. But the ones that we didn't adopt, we kept them here. And when they would die, it was so devastating for my wife and I. And we said, we got to find a way, if there is a way, to help them live longer. So we developed a way of feeding these dogs and by caring for them in a unique way. That average dog lived about 3 years longer. I mean, and that's pretty spectacular by itself. Great Danes that were living 7 to 9 years were living 10 to 12 years. And we said, well, geez, is there anything else we could do? So we thought, well, the only thing else is make food. And we thought if we made like the best food and we could afford it for our dogs, the best food there is, we could maybe pull out another year. And what we found out when we hired all these nutritionists upset us so much. I want to share it with your viewers and listeners that we never got over it. And what we found out is that every pet food company knows something the average person doesn't know, which is the more fat content you put in the food, the hungrier it makes the animal. And, there's a human correlation. About 10 years ago, a movie came out called Super Size Me, where this gentleman had gone into McDonald's every day for a month, gained 55 pounds, and nearly died from the high fat content. So we said, well, we're not going to have a high fat content. And I don't know if any of you have dogs, but if you do, or cats, go feel your animal's food when you get home tonight. I mean, rub it in your fingers, then put the kibbles down, rub your fingers together, and see if you don't feel that slightly greasy feeling. Well, it's on all the foods we've ever felt. And you say, well, how bad can that be? Well, it's animal fat. And if you think it this way, would you take a can of bacon grease and pour it down your garbage disposal? Well, of course not, because you know that unlike water that evaporates, animal fat coagulates. And when it hardens, it's like cement. And if you took a can of bacon fat and poured it down your garbage disposal and you let it sit there for 4 or 5 hours, you'd be buying a new garbage disposal. So here's my point. When you realize that animal fat will ruin metal, what do you think animal fat sprayed onto the outside of every single kibble, of every single bite your dog takes, what is it doing to your dog's arteries and intestines? It's killing them. It's shortening their lives dramatically. So by not doing that, plus having non-GMO, I mean, most people have heard of non-GMO, meaning no genetically modified organisms in the food. Between those two major things, plus some other smaller ones, we've got dogs living to 27 and a half years, including giant breeds. Dogs running around like puppies in their 20s. And every week we get about 1,100 people contacting us. And many of them say the same thing, which is, I don't understand. My dog is having a hard time getting around. He's 9 years old. And I'm watching videos of dogs running around like puppies in their 20s. What is it? Have you discovered the fountain of youth? I say, no. I said, believe me, I wish I had, because I'd be drinking from it. But we found a way to help them live longer by making the best food in the world without excessive fat, without excessive protein, using non-genetically modified ingredients like rice. I don't know if you guys know this, but in the United States, 98% of all rice has been genetically modified. 98%. We buy from that 2% that isn't genetically modified, which costs us like 2 arms and a leg, because only 2% of the country has it. So all of these things together, and that's why we came out with our Gentle Giants dog and puppy food, which is a charity for us. We take no salary from this, zero. And our new Gentle Giants cat and kitten food, and we're in Walmart, Target, and stores all across America, online, all the online companies, our own website, gentlegiantsdogfood.com. But this is all about helping animals live longer. And I got to tell you one quick thing. People say to me, well, very few, but a few people say to me, I only have one complaint, Burt. I said, what's that? All you do is about animals. Why don't you do something for people? I said, well, now, wait a minute. If I help you keep your dog living an extra 5 or 10 years longer, don't you think I've done something for you? And they go, oh, well, never thought of it that way. But that's what we do. And it's our charity. We love animals. Don't take any salary from it. And can I tell you, I've never been happier in my life.
That is awesome, man. One of the things that I love doing these interviews with Justin and stuff is when we get to talk to people who are so passionate about something, and you could tell that you love what you're doing. You love the dogs, and you put your money where your mouth is, because like you said, you've adopted over 150 animals at one time.
Oh no, 15,527 years. That's as many as 50 a week.
That's a lot of small horses. These are big.
So after you got done watching 101 Dalmatians for the first time, where you're like, I can give you guys some pointers on what to do.
Yeah. Can I tell you something? It changes your life when you really spend time with animals. I mean, animals are very real, they don't put on airs. They don't, they're not deceptive. You basically see what you get and get what you see. And and they're incredibly loving. You know, I mean, if any of you have pets, cats, dogs, I mean, they live for their pet parent. I mean, it's their whole life. You know, you can come home from the worst day in the world, and yet that dog is just so happy to see you, you know, and and all they want is your love. I mean, my goodness, you know, I mean, look, I have 2 children, 2 human children, and I've had 15,500 dogs. Okay. And about 300 to 500 cats. That's how we developed our cat food. And let me tell you, I love my human children, but I will have to say something about pets. Okay. Of the 15,500 dogs that I've rescued and 500 cats, not one of them has ever asked me to buy them a car.
Maybe you just don't understand what they're saying, Burt. Like, I don't know.
I mean, with your dog food, they'll be old enough to drive.
Yeah, there you go.
That is awesome. Everybody go check out GentleGiantsPetProducts.com. I will have the link all over our social media and in the description down below. So click the link, check it out. I know I am, because as we were researching all of this, I myself, because I remember when I got the dog I have now, I was told do not get kibbles and bits. So I buy some expensive food. I don't know if it's, you know, how great it is, but I'm definitely going to look into Gentle Giants, because
well, here's what we found out. Here's what we found out. It doesn't matter, in my opinion, if you buy the cheapest or the most expensive. Every one of these companies knows the same thing. So, you know, you can spend more. I mean, you know, it's like people said, whoa, did you hear about Rolls-Royce coming out with a cigarette? I said, well, I wouldn't smoke it. I said, all it means is that you're going to die in style if you smoke it. You know, I mean, and it's not, you know, what it is doing something that's healthful for the animal, pure nutrition, not all these fancy things. And by the way, you know, you go in a store, and if you look in a pet store and you look up on the shelves, you see these pet foods that have this enormous amount of protein. Why do they do that? They don't do that because the pet needs it. No, it's because studies have shown that the average person who doesn't know too much goes on a shelf and says, well, wait a minute, this dog food has 24% protein and this one has 28%, but oh my gosh, the one in the middle has 30%. And can I tell you something? That shortens dogs' lives as well. And you have to really look through get rid of the marketing and look what is pure, wholesome nutrition for your pet. And that's what we offer.
Oh, and I had a big dog, a Rottweiler named Carl. He died a few years back, but I'm just thinking now, like, man, like to have him around for a few more years would have been just amazing. And then also, you know, like my mom, who was it was her dog, but she was put off from big dogs, you know, because they only have the shorter lifespan. So she's like, I don't want to do that again. You know, I want a dog that's going to stick around for a little bit longer. So, you know, that means that the door is shut for bigger dogs and stuff like that too.
You're absolutely right, which means that they end up being put to death more often. But, you know, on our website, GentleGiantsDogFood.com, I got an email last August. I guess it's now a little over a year. And this email was from somebody I didn't know. He said, dear Mr. Ward, he said, I've been feeding my German Shepherd your food for 15 years. He just died, but he was 23 years old. Now, 23 years old for a German Shepherd? Unheard of.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
And so all I'm saying is that you can have wonderful stuff and you can have your pet longer. And we tell everybody, come to our website, read about our special feeding and care program. In other words, we feed dogs differently than other people. I said, well, how can that be that different? Oh, it's dramatically different. We elevate their food so they never lean down. They only tilt their head down. We feed our dogs and cats 5 or more times a day, smaller, more frequent meals. People say, well, why would you do that? I said, hey, use the human example. If you were at your doctor's office and you ask your doctor the following question, doctor, am I better off eating 1 or 2 big meals a day or 4 or 5 smaller meals? What do you think your doctor would say? Well, they're going to say 4 or 5 smaller meals. But people don't apply it to an animal. They don't realize that an animal is not designed as well as a human being. Dogs and cats don't live as long. They're not designed as well. So it's extra important that you go out of your way. Smaller, more frequent meals, elevated food and water dishes.
Well, again, if you guys aren't convinced by the passion behind the man, like just you can go and you can find all this research online. And I'm definitely checking that out because my dog is like my closest friend. And if anything happened to her, I would go nuts. So I'll be running out to the stores. Like everybody, again, go check out gentlegiantspetproducts.com.
But also, oh, sorry, I just want to get one more thing in real quick. Super awesome, like you said, like you and your wife don't take any salary. Like I really dig that. Like that, just have people do good things just because they're good to do. Like it's really rare, I think, and especially for a company like you're saying, you're in Walmart, you're in Target, like you obviously could be out there for the buck, but like it's really cool that you're doing a good thing because it's a good thing to do.
Well, but there's also another reason why we don't take anything, and that's because think of the people out there that have pets. Sure, there's lots of families and they do very well, but there's also some elderly people that maybe their kids have grown up and moved out, maybe they have a spouse or they no longer have a spouse, and maybe that dog is the last thing in the world they have, and they're on a pension or a Social Security, they don't have much money, and they just love that animal. That's why we do this, so that everybody can have a chance for their best friend to live longer and healthier. That's why we do this.
Yeah, that's super awesome. I really appreciate that.
I gotta say, growing up with Max, he was always the Batman guy, but I was always a fan of Robin. I
feel like they come together. It's not like I didn't like Robin.
You both think, well, Batman and Robin, they're the dynamic duo, guys.
I'm just saying, like I looked up to Robin, specifically your Robin. I remember back in the 80s, it was on from 7 to 8 on Fox. So every night from 7 to 8 at Fox, I was there in front of my television to see how they got captured and then eventually how they got away. And you've had the privilege of playing Robin now for 60 years because you came back and played him again in Supergirl at the very beginning, walking a dog again.
There you go. Well, Dick Grayson, yeah. But I also played Robin with a voice in 2 movies from Warner Brothers. They came out in 2017, 2018. Adam West did the voice before he passed away of Batman. And in the second movie, it was Batman versus Two-Face. And here you have Adam doing the voice of Batman, and I played the voice of Robin, and Two-Face was played by none other than William Shatner. So here you had in a movie that the 2 most iconic television shows represented. I mean, Batman and Star Trek. I mean, I wish Leonard Nimoy were around because we would have loved to have him too. But what a great thing. And Shatner was great to work with. I mean, very sharp, very, very brilliant man. And it was just so much fun. And he did a great role as this evil villain. He was fantastic.
Oh, I was so excited when I saw. I've been saying for years and years before those came out that I wish they'd go back and revisit some of these things that we love and bring the cast back and maybe do an animated thing if they can't do it live action, because that'd be fun to watch. And sure enough, they were fun to watch, especially the one with Two-Face, because Shatner was around in the 60s and you could totally see him portraying Two-Face.
Yeah, even Adam and I tried to revive ourselves in a TV series about Batman and Robin being older. I mean, there's a lot of humor that could be like, Batman's retired and all of a sudden crime is rampant, kind of like what's happening now in our country, right? And so they come to him, that Commissioner Gordon says, Batman, I know you haven't done anything in all these years, but we really need your help. So he goes to his closet and he he sees his costume and he's beating the dust off the costume. And here, he calls me and I'm trying to get the tights up over my legs. It doesn't fit as well. I mean, you could have the most fun thing. People would be crying, laughing, and having so much fun.
You guys kind of did that with Return to the Batcave.
Yeah. Well, we did that. It was a little different, but it was, yeah. And that was Sunday night movie of the week. I think it was CBS. Movie of the week. So it was a lot of fun, and that particular movie was based on his book and my book. Where they kind of pulled parts of each book out and put them together to create that hour-and-a-half movie.
I think Batman '66, The Dark Knight Returns, mashup would be genius. I think that would just be a lot of fun. What would you say? Who was your favorite like off-brand villain that you would have come back? Like if you're doing something like that, I mean, like.
Well,
Sorry, go ahead.
here, let me explain. For me, I was 20 years old when I got the role, turning 21, and every week we had a different star who guest as a villain. Julie Newmar was Catwoman, Cesar Romero was the Joker, Frank Gorshin was the Riddler, Burgess Meredith was the Penguin, and then you had Vincent Price was Egghead, and all these famous people. And for me, I mean, I was like a kid in the candy store, because every week this was somebody I either saw on television or I watched in a movie theater. I mean, these were all, very recognizable to me. And so I got a kick out of all of them. And then, Batman became the number one. Oh, let's see here. Oh, upgraded here. Okay, the movie. Batman became the number one and number two television show in the entire world. And every actor and actress wanted to be on our show. And of course, there wasn't enough roles. That's when they created that scene of Batman and Robin, climbing up the outside of the building, and then a window would open and you'd have a different celebrity every week. So that added one more celebrity each week. And the very first one was none other than Sammy Davis Jr. Okay, then we had Jerry Lewis, Don Ho, Colonel Klink, Lurch, Betty White. I mean, Dick Clark. We had everybody that was prominent, got a chance to open the window and, have some dialogue with Batman and Robin.
Is Betty White eating Gentle Giants? Because she's doing so well. I love Betty White.
She's very impressive. Very, very impressive.
But seriously, back, how was Sammy Davis Jr.? What was he like?
Incredible. He was exactly as you would see him on television. Very nice, very friendly. Every one of these stars, I was so impressed with how, dignified in a very real way they were, and how they took acting in such a serious way, and yet they loved our show, because our show was one of the only shows that they ever got to be as big, the character that they were in life, the Joker's laugh or the Riddler's laugh or the all the kind of, these heinous villains. It's so much bigger than life. And, kids, our audience was the entire spectrum of people. Children loved Batman for the hero worship. Okay. Adults loved our show for the nostalgia of the comic book they read. And at the time in the 60s, the hardest audience to get were teenagers and college kids. And the reason why, that was a rebellious period where everyone to be out cruising the outdoor drive-through restaurant on a Saturday night or Friday night. And we pull those kids in by the fact that we had the double meanings and the innuendo and the campy style, and all of that. And I heard from people at the time that in the colleges, they would get to a big dorm area or cafeteria an hour and a half in advance just to get a seat to be able to watch Batman. It was phenomenal. Women had Batman hairdos. It was just you just almost can't believe. And I will tell you this, you might find interesting. The opening night of Batman had a Nielsen rating of a 55 share. And what that meant was that of all the televisions on in North America, that included Mexico, US, and Canada, 55% were watching Batman. And all the other regional, local stations, and even the other two networks shared the other 45%. It was bigger than any Super Bowl has ever been in terms of an audience. And it just, at that point, it just blew out all across the world. We're 400 countries, Batman.
So you get this role, you're a young 20-something guy, and now you're being watched all over the world. How did that, when did it hit you? It's holy crap, I'm in this thing. And then how did it affect you?
You know, it didn't affect me as much as you might have thought. And I'll tell you why. Because I could put on that costume and go out. And I mean, let me tell you something, at these autograph things, or I mean, where Adam and I would, when we first launched the first Batman movie, we went to New York and did 33 out of 36 theaters in 3 days. The crowd, we had 17 police on the bus and 200 police at each theater, and things were coming down. I mean, you just can't believe the craziness. But I wore a costume, and it's almost like, I don't know how to say it, looking through that mask is almost like looking at a television set. I was in this costume, so I'm kind of like, a diver in a suit, an iron helmet, and everything, watching stuff. So I mean, I could go out and make an appearance where people literally would almost get into a fight over getting a paper drinking cup that I've been drinking out of, and stand in line for 5 hours to get an autograph. And yet, when I would take a break and change out of the costume and go right out among the same people that I had seen 15 minutes before, nobody recognized me. I mean, that's really cool. It's almost like being the invisible man. I mean, it was really, really cool. But at the same time, it grounded me in that it was the character that people were crazy about. It wasn't me, it was the character. And so as a result, I always kind of maintained, I think, a very healthy attitude towards it. And also, people think it's so glamorous to work in making a movie. Well, let me tell you what it was for me. When I would come to work and when I got the role, and by the way, there were 1,100 young actors that interviewed for the part of Robin, 1,100. And when I got the role, the executive producer, William Dozier, said to me, "Burt, would you like to know why we selected you to play Robin?" I said, "Yes, sir, I would." And he said, "Because in our mind, forgetting television, if there really was a Robin, I mean, like the real thing, you personally would be it. So we don't want you to, quote, act. We want you to be yourself and be enthusiastic." And that's exactly what I did for 120 episodes. Okay. And because I just, and when I like do these Batman movies, a few years ago, they say, "Oh, Burt, how hard was it for you to recreate the role?" Well, it's not hard at all. Being myself, but coming back to what it's like to work in making a film, I would go to work, and I was 20 years old, going on 21. Adam West was the youngest person on the set next to me. He was 37. And then you had the crew of some of the finest people in the business, the best cameramen and the best lighting people. These guys are all in their 50s and 60s, right? So I'm like, my childhood, so to speak, was kind of limited. And you go on a set and you wait. The average wait time between shots is 45 minutes. 45 minutes between shots. And then you work for 30 seconds. 30 seconds and wait 45 minutes. And you think, well, people would say to me all the time, "Well, Burt, just bring a good book and just read your book all day long." Well, something happens when you're on a set that you never get to do that, even though you're always waiting. It's like I could, do a shot, my 30 seconds, and I go sit down and I pick up this book. "Oh, Burt, we need to check your makeup. Can you come on over here?" "Oh, Burt, the wardrobe guys want to put a different t-shirt." "Oh, Burt, this." Oh, you never have any peace. The only peace and quiet was when I was filming. Everything else is like, oh my gosh, you're pulled in all these different directions. So I don't think I read an entire page of a book in 3.5 years of filming. You never have any peace.
I could listen to you tell me stories all day. Like, it's fantastic. I gotta ask, did Aunt Harriet ever figure it out?
And here, let me tell you about Madge Blake. Madge Blake played Aunt Harriet. She was one of the sweetest ladies I've ever met. I mean, just a true sweetheart. But she was very nervous, a very, very nervous person. And I had something happen on the set that I really was like one of these learning lessons, I was standing next to her and there's supposed to be some dialogue. and she says something, Adam says something, and then I'm supposed to talk and cross over to where, Bruce Wayne is, right? Well, I stood next to her and I could just feel her nervousness when they would go to film, right? You could just feel it, and she's kind of fidgeting and this and that. So here comes the scene, and just before I start to talk, she grabs my wrist, okay, like holding on. And there's no way I could move. I mean, she had a death grip on me. There's no way. And they say, cut, Burt, you were supposed to cross on your line. What's the matter? You know something? Such a sweet little old lady. I could not say, oh, well, she kind of held me. And no, I just took it like, geez, I'm sorry. But then what did I do? I keep my arms behind my back. I'd stay an extra foot away because you could just tell that she was getting more and more nervous, as they're getting ready to roll that camera, man. She would have gotten a hold of me again. I would be in more trouble. But that was just kind of a scene, kind of something you never would notice. But things that actually happen on the set that are so much different than what you might imagine.
So, do you think the mask helped you with the performance of it? Did you ever feel nervous on set? Like that kind of brought a question out.
No. Can I tell you something? That was like the only piece I had. I mean, and it was so easy. I mean, just think if you have something to say, and you're not having to say it as some character or some monster or some whatever. You're just saying it yourself. And let me give you an example of what it meant to do something where you were, in a way, playing your own personality. In the very first episode with the Riddler, Batman and Robin are in the Batmobile. We believe that the Riddler is going to pull a heist at a museum. And we pull up outside what looks like a warehouse, and we climb up the wall to this and that. But when we pulled up, okay, the crew had their camera on my side of the Batmobile, and so they expected me to open the door and get out. Well, I didn't do that because, hey, I didn't feel like it. I would, if most of the time I jumped over the door, but up in the seat, stood on the door and walked to the back on top of the fin and then jumped off, right? And the director said, cut, what are you doing, Burt? I said, what do you mean? I just did, I did what was right. And he thought for a minute. His name was Bob Butler, by the way. He thought for a minute. He says, that is really creative. All right, get the plywood, lay down the track. We're gonna, dolly with him. And it took him a half an hour, sure enough. And then we did that scene that way. But you know something? And then later on, here's something very interesting. About a year and a half ago, I got my star on Hollywood Boulevard, and which is a great honor. Oh, fantastic. And it right next to Adams, or right across, because on Hollywood Boulevard, I don't know if you know this, but what they do is every other one faces the other way. So people that are walking east on Hollywood Boulevard, they see the star's name facing them, and then there's one facing the other, and then the next one faces them, so that everybody, no matter what direction you go, gets to see, those stars. But right after that event, which was just incredible, it is customary for the celebrity who receives the award to throw kind of a party, thanking people that, and people in the industry and the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce and, all that kind of stuff. So I threw a little gathering around the corner because we were right on Hollywood Boulevard in front of the Guinness Museum of World Records. I mean, you couldn't have found a better place. But right around the corner is the famous Hollywood Museum. So I threw this event there, and unexpectedly, I mean, although I found out it was intentional, Robert Butler, the director of the pilot episode, okay, the first director I ever worked with, came to the event, and I just went nuts, and I hugged him, and I couldn't believe it. It'd been 55 years, all right? And he to give you a little inside scoop, he says, Burt, I have a story to tell you. I said, okay. And I said, yeah. He says, before we started working, the first day on the set, the executive producer came over to me and said, we just hired this young kid to play Robin. And, I mean, he seems right for everything, but I don't know. He's never worked with a director before. I don't know. I want you to go talk to him and see if you can work with him or see if there's going to be a problem. Okay. And I remember he came over to me and said, can I speak to you for a few minutes? I said, sure, sir. And I was always brought up to be very respectful. Yes, sir. No, sir. That kind of thing. And I remember he asked me just some simple questions or whatever it was. I don't remember the questions, but and then I never thought of it again until 55 years later. He said, I went back to the executive producer, and the executive producer said, well, what do you think of him? Do you think you could direct him? He says, let me tell you something. This guy is such a natural. When something is a natural, don't with it. Leave it alone, because what he does is going to be far better than I ever could direct him to do. And and I was so blown away, because when I started thinking about it, yeah, I never told him I was going to walk on the side of the edge of the car. I never told him when I would jump out of this or do this, and they would stop and they would go back and film it, because it was so original and so unrehearsed. And there's something about, and like Adam and my relationship, I got to tell you something. Adam and I had a chemistry. I mean, I adored the man. We got along so well, which is traditionally not true, because there's a lot of competition and like who's the big star and all that stuff. No. Adam and I met him at the screen test. He and I screen tested together. I met him 15 minutes before I screen tested. They said, Burt, I want you to meet the